Welcome back, HC Nation. This is Zach Edwards with another episode of the Adventure Box Podcast. That's right, we're talking everything history. That's right. And so today we're being sponsored by Historical Conquest, which is a really fun game, and it's there for you to be able to play and just have fun. And if you learn a little bit of history, so be it. But that's what you get. Just by playing the game, you're actually going to learn history while just having a ton of fun. So, let's get into this. Okay, now, today we're going to be talking about something really big. You guys are the trailblazers. So, in this podcast, we're going to be hitching up our wagons and heading west. So, I'm hosting this. I'm Captain Zach Edwards, and today we're exploring two powerful and yet painful parts of history, parts of the American Westward stories. Now, as I said, back a long time ago, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Andrew Jackson, he was a president of the United States around 1830. Well, what happened around 1830 also? Yeah, that's right. It was the Indian Removal Act. Oh, okay. So what makes this really weird is the fact that my great-great-grandfather, Andrew Jackson, was the one that instigated the Removal Act. At the same time, my great-great-great-grandmother, not related to Andrew Jackson on the other side of my family. Actually, I think the same family line, being the Edwards, but two different sides of it. We're from the Cherokee. That's right. Two of my grandmothers gave up their children to white folk in order to have their children survive. So we're going to go more into the Removal Act and Andrew Jackson and his whole vision of moving westward. And how, though that's the story, it's not actually 100% accurate that it was Andrew Jackson that just kicked out the Indians. It wasn't exactly like that. Though a lot of people like to tell you that, especially in public schools. Now, the second part we're going to be talking about is Texas independence and the annexation, which means they joined the United States. So this was a rise of a rebellion of a republic, a war with Mexico, and what it really means to be a manifest destiny. That's right, where we're moving west. So cinch up your saddles and fill your canteens. We're hitting the dusty roads and expanding and going, to these conflicts and the consequences that came afterwards. So here we go. Before a single settler set up its flag, planted his flag in the West, the land was alive with nations, not empty wilderness. The Cherokee formed basically down in, well, you know what? I got a picture for you. Let me show you a little bit of this picture. Now, whoa, what happened to my picture? It just disappeared. There it is. This guy's named Andrew Jackson. We're going to get to him in just a minute. But, there you go. So the Cherokee were basically in this area. The Chickasaw were right here. Choctaw were here. We had the Creeks and a bunch of other native tribes. The Seminoles, all over the place. The Cherokee basically had Georgia, mostly northern Georgia and such. The Chickasaw and the Choctaw built towns across Mississippi and Alabama. The Creek had political alliances and economics. Well, their economics were built into the Deep South. They actually worked with a lot of plantation owners and were in a lot of fights with the plantation owners too. And then you had the Seminoles who defended Florida and the swamplands. And it had a fiery, fierce resistance. So these were complex societies of different languages, governance, trade, and religion. They weren't nomads. They actually had homes. But they were nomads in the sense that they actually had a lot of area and they did move around within their set areas. Okay, now some of the northern tribes, they were more nomadic. These ones were basically set in their own areas, in their own villages. But the settlers and politicians, yeah, this wasn't their home. What? Wait a second. They'd been there for generations. Yeah, but there's a lot of settlers, and they're hungry for land, so they were willing to take over for somebody else's land. So these native homelands became obstacles in the expansion. And the new president would act on that desire for more land, even to a tragic cost of a lot of people and even their lives. So let's talk about back in about 1812. You have a man named Andrew Jackson. He was a war hero, a frontiersman, and the people's president. They elected him. They were so happy to have him. Now, Jackson was more than just a president. He was a symbol of expansion. He believed in a nation stretching from sea to sea, a place where the white yeoman's farm could thrive. Now, white yeoman's, yes, that's right. He was a Democrat, and he was very much in line with the Southerners. So they wanted to actually expand slavery as much as possible and to grow his contingents. No. Let's see. The people that support him. Yeah, that's the word. Okay. This is where Jackson came up with a solution. How do we get more land from the ocean to the Mississippi River? It was still home to a lot of Native American tribes. So Jackson's solution, it's called the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Now, like I said, there's a lot more to it than anybody's going to tell you. You can go on AI, go on ChatGPT, and it will tell you one thing. It's not exactly the whole story. So here's your assignment. Try this out. Go on to ChatGPT, whatever, and ask him. Let's see. What was the Indian Removal Act of 1830 all about? Now he's going to, Mr. Chat, he's going to say, well, it was to actually move out the Native Americans from this area. Okay, then you can ask, next question, what happened to the Cherokee that they had to move out of their lands? And ChatGPT, woo, whatever that is. Okay, Mr. Chat, he'll come back and say, well, this is when the U.S. government pushed the Cherokee out of the land. Is that completely true? No, it's not. Either way, it is a sad story, and yeah, it's horrible things would happen in the past, but it's not exactly how they put it together. So let me run you back a little bit further in history. Yeah, that's right. We're going to tell you a little bit about what happened before the Indian Removal Act with Andrew Jackson and the Cherokee. Okay, so here's the story. Before the Cherokee were marched west along the bitter path we now call the Trail of Tears, there was a betrayal from within. Let me take you back around 1830, when the Cherokee Nation stood between two futures. On one side, a proud people with a written language and a constitution, schools and farms. And then the other side was the U.S. government. Wait, what? Yes, that's right. They had a constitution, schools, farms, and a written language. On the other side was the U.S. government, led by Andrew Jackson, demanding their land. Well, it was an agreement. Wait a second. What? Okay, let me get a little more into this. Okay, in 1830, Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. This giving the government power to relocate native tribes west of the Mississippi. So they were being moved from east of the Mississippi to west of the Mississippi. Most Cherokees opposed this. They chose to fight the removal in court, though. Yeah, that's right. They weren't going to fight with spears and arrows. They wanted to fight in court, not with weapons. So they actually won in Winchester versus Georgia in 1832. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cherokee. They were supposed to keep the land, but President Jackson refused to enforce the ruling. He wanted them gone. Well, yeah. Me saying that is it's a little bit more than what it actually was. So that's when there was a small group of Cherokees. Now, they weren't just a small group of Cherokees. They were Cherokee officials that were not officially sent by the Cherokee. They did not have permission from the chief and most of the nation. So they went out and they said, we will sign an agreement with you. because we want to keep our people safe and we want to be able to get some money for them in this new land. So they wrote up the Treaty of New Echota. So the Treaty of New Echota, E-C-H-O-T-A, in 1835. Now these men, including Major Ridge, his son John Ridge, and alias Bonnet, I don't know, one of those. He believed removal was inevitable. They knew it was coming. So they thought it would be better to take a deal and try to preserve peace among the Cherokee instead of going to war, which they knew Andrew Jackson, he wanted that land. He might just come in with troops. So they sold all the Cherokee land east of the Mississippi to the U.S. government for $5 million and a promise of land in the West. Wait a minute, $5 million. That's like a third of the Louisiana Purchase. So look at the map. Look at the map. So this much land, $5 million. Louisiana Purchase, just a few years before, less than 30 years before, encompassed like a third of the United States. That was $15 million. 30 years later, $5 million for the Cherokee land. So these Cherokee, they decided, well, we want to have peace with the U.S. government, and we want a big piece of land for ourselves west. So that's what they did. They signed the treaty, they sold their land, and it did not make them very popular. The vast majority of Cherokee, they led by the principal chief, John Ross, were outraged completely. They had not agreed to this. They hadn't signed, but the U.S. Senate ratified the treaty anyways, and by just one vote. So the Cherokees refused to leave. So in 1838, Jackson gave a specific time. They had to leave by this point. At this point, it was no longer Jackson anymore. It was his successor, Martin Van Buren. He sent the military down there. The soldiers rounded up the Cherokee families. Men and women and children were forced them into stockades, basically like an internment camp. They were given little time to gather their belongings. Actually, truth is, they had a good amount of time to gather their belongings, but they were not leaving. So the military came down and said, you got a tiny bit of time, and then you're out. So homes were left behind, fields abandoned. They were farmers. They had schools. They had a constitution. They had all these things. And yet, they were not allowed to facilitate that. So soldiers rounded them up and start to move them out. And because of delays and poor planning, they forced them out to march out late fall. What happens near late fall? Well, you get freezing weather. That's right. You got months of freezing cold weather. The Cherokees walked nearly 1,000 miles to Oklahoma on foot. So they came from their land here, the Trail of Tears. I don't know why they would go north, but they went north instead of going down south, where they could have actually made it without a lot of the weather issues and all the people dying. The reason why I say that, over 4,000 Cherokees died from cold, disease, and starvation. It was not just a relocation. It was an act of erasure. One of those words. Basically taking over. One signed in ink, ignored by justice, and remembered in sorrow. That's how betrayal, lawlessness, and a winter without mercy gave birth to what we call the Trail of Tears. So Jackson claimed it was just and humane. Well, because they had a treaty that not all of the Cherokees agreed with. Either way, not all the Cherokees would have agreed on anything. I mean, look at the United States. We're like 50-50, or we're like 45-55 all the time. So it most likely would never have happened anyways. So what are they going to do next? Were the military going to go in there and kick them out without the $5 million, without the land promised to them? I don't know. Anyways, inhumane because of improper planning. Idiots. Idiots. Totally. Okay, so the Cherokee Nation challenged the law in court, and they won. That's right. They won it in 1832 when they were told to leave. But because of that, because of the betrayal that was done by their own people, the decision was to round up the Cherokee and push them out. So nearly 100,000 Native Americans, not just the Cherokee, there's about 16,000 Cherokee were uprooted, but 100,000 Cherokee were all moved. And over 4,000 of the Cherokee during the Trail of Tears in 1838 died on the way. Cold, starvation, disease. Men, women, children marched at gunpoint. Homes were burned. The entire culture was disrupted. It wasn't a trail of hope. It was a trail of mourning. And it cleared the way for more settlers to go west. Not exactly a great way of making a legacy for your country, right? No, it's not. Sadly, it's over with. I can't say anything about my grandmothers who were affected by that. I wasn't there, so I can't say. But what I can say is, I'm glad it's over with. I don't know. I don't know what the best way of putting that is. It's a hard thing to think about. That we would literally uproot families and push them into the winter. By even putting them into stockades. Andrew Jackson, not a good act. Martin Van Buren, not a good act. Why in the world? But you know what? The people supported him at it. So, I gotta say, not just them. The people had an issue. They were heartless during that time. Or maybe ignorant. I don't know. Let's keep going. Let's talk about another phase. Less sad. No, actually, it's not less sad. It's just as sad. Okay. So today's going to be a day of just sadness. Sadly. But I digress. Let's go. Let's keep going. We're going to talk about Texas. Now, it's great what happened. But it's not great what it took to get to that point. So, now let's change the scenery. Yeah, ride southwest. So, let me show you some of these pictures. Okay, so we got Andrew Jackson. You saw that. We have all these different tribes coming down from all across the U.S. and being pushed into Oklahoma, Kansas, those type of areas. Not in Texas, though. They were all above because this was not American land at the time. We couldn't give that away. So, during this time, if you look right here, let me zoom up in this. So there's the Native American population. 1820, there's about 471,000 Native Americans in the land. By 1870, nearly half. 278,000. Not half, nearly half. Okay, so let's keep going. Here's what pictures of the Trail of Tears with the Cherokee all going out in the freezing cold, walking with their livestock and their wagons, trying to find their new home in Oklahoma. We already like that picture. Okay, here's one thing I want to, you know what? I'm going to bring this up next time. We're going to bring this up next time because I'm running out of time. Okay, so here we go. Anyone know what this one is? This picture is? If you can't see it, it shows an old mission that's been like bombarded by cannons. Yeah, there's one major story where this came out during the U.S. history. It's called the Battle or the Siege of the Alamo. Now, before we get to this point, let's go back a little bit further and let's talk about the 1920s. So let's go before the Trail of Tears. Mexico has gained its independence from Spain. They took back Mexico from them. And they own a huge chunk of land, including what was called Tejas. What? Tejas. Actually, Tejas. Now, Tejas, you know, sounds like Texas. That's right. Tejas was Mexican land. They owned it. Mexicans say, hey, Americans, want some land? Come on down. It's our land, but You can have some of it. Just follow our rules, just a few of them. Speak Spanish, convert to Catholicism, and obey Mexican laws. Then you can have your own land in Texas. Now, thousands of Americans, they all came down, basically leaving the United States because they said, that sounds great. Now, most of them didn't know how to speak Spanish, but you know what, they could learn, right? Okay, so they move in. They're bringing their slaves in there. They're bringing their livestock. They're bringing everything possible from the South and taking over Texas. Now, here's the thing. Slavery was outlawed in Mexico. Uh-oh. So tensions grew. By 1835, Mexican President Santa Anna tried to tighten up control. The settlers now called themselves Texians, and they revolted. The next year, 1836, the Texas Revolution. Now, again, you've heard of this thing. It's called the Alamo. This was a mission that had walls around it to keep it safe, to keep the people safe. This included about 200 defenders, including Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie. And they held off thousands of Mexican troops for 13 days. In the end, just in the end, there was a complete, almost massacre of it. Now, all the women and children, they hid in this building. This is the mission. Again, this is like a church for the Catholic Church. They hid in the chapel because the Mexican people were very religious. They did not want to attack churches. Now, if a cannon hit the church, not their fault. Shouldn't have been there in the first place. I mean, all those people that were there breaking the law. Okay, so in the end, all 200 were killed of the men. But their sacrifice became a rallying cry for the rest of Texas. Let me show you another picture. That's one I'm quite proud of. Maybe, if it comes up. Come on, where's that picture? Oh, gotta zoom out. There we go. That one. That's right. You guys might have seen this from Historical Conquest. This is one of our play mats. But if you can see, there's all these walls built up around the mission, which is right here. So all these walls are built up. You have cannon embankments, and this is the Mexican army all coming in, attacking the few men that were left over by this point. Dave Bowie, no, sorry, that wasn't David Bowie. That was Davy Crockett, right here. Yeah, so you can actually see David Crockett on there. They say that he took down a lot of men around him. Now, David Bowie, he was interesting. Jim Bowie. Whoo, got the two mixed up. Okay, Jim Bowie, he was awesome. He actually had a lot of people all attack him at the same time. And there was bullet holes in all the men. Then there was knife wounds in all the men. And he even had he had his hand on his Bowie knife, which is why they call it Bowie knife, stuck into one of the Mexican soldiers at that point when they found his body. So, I think that's more of like a myth of what's going on, of what went on, but close enough. But it was because of their heroism, they were heroes to the rest of the Texanians. Okay, sorry. Losing my words there. Okay, so that same year, Sam Houston led the Texanian forces in a surprise attack on the Battle of San Jacinto. Jacinto. Oh, man. That's not good for me. One second. Man, okay. So my wording was a little bit off, but I got it corrected. San Jacinto. So, San Jacinto was a battle between the Mexicans and Santa Anna and Sam Houston and the Texanians. And just like that, they secured their independence because the Texanians won. Now, not the Americans won, not the United States Army won, the Texanians. But Texas wanted something more. They didn't want to just be Texas, though it was great. There was no security there. They were their own country for about 9 years, but after that, they wanted to become part of the United States. So, this is what we call the annexation of Texas. So back in Washington, let's go all the way back into Washington. There is great tension at this point. Texas wanted to join the Union, but it's a slave-holding republic. That's right, the republic, the country of Texas, was a slave-holding country. And that scared a lot of the northern states. Admitting Texas would basically mean that more slave territories could join, and it would tip the balance of Congress towards slave ownership, which means they would never have gotten rid of slavery. Plus, annexing Texas means making Mexico angry. So, this area was still considered a rebellious province. So, for nearly a decade, Texas was just basically sat in limbo. They just waited until 1845. Now, this is another person. We're going to be talking about all these presidents in Wednesday's episode. President James K. Polk. Yeah, that's right. You might have heard of him. He was an expansionist president from the core. When he came into office, that's what he talked about. He talked about what's called manifest destiny. It's the idea that the U.S. is destined to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific. He included in that Texas. He wanted Texas to become the 28th state. So they voted on it. And on the 28th, I don't remember what the day was. In December of 1845, Mexico was not thrilled about this. They made him the 28th state. Like right off the bat, James K. Polk, he came in and he wanted it and he got it. Mexico, not happy at all. They were furious. And they set the stage. This one act, making Texas a state, started the Mexican-American War. But that's not the story that we're talking about right now. We will talk about that in the future. So we will come back to that as we come. But still, with Texas now part of the U.S., this was a stronger road to the West. California, Arizona, New Mexico were opened up wide. Now, remember, this was all land supposedly owned by Mexico. From, Utah area down to Texas, all the way over to New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, California, all that Mexico. Yeah, that taking away that much land, it's like basically the Louisiana Purchase again, but without buying it. The West, moving west, they were going to take it. We're going to talk about that next time. So let's recap a little bit of what we talked about. So first, we talked about the Indian Removal Act. Under Andrew Jackson, led to this heartbreaking and many deaths of Native Americans. And it cleared out a huge portion of land for the settlers. Now, this would push not just the Indian Removal Act, but the Trail of Tears was a journey where they pushed the Cherokees to walk by foot 1,000 miles during the winter, early winter, where 4,000 Cherokee died. There's no words that could explain how horrible that was. Now, next was the Texas Revolution. It was a rebellion born of culture clashes. Remember? It was Mexico themselves. They said, Americans, come on down. You're not people from the United States. Come on down. Come join our land. Enjoy it. You just got to obey the laws, speak Spanish, convert to Catholicism, and you got it. People are like, heck yeah, I'll do that. I would too, minus the converting and the speaking Spanish. I want to have my freedom. Well, that's basically what the people said. Like, you know what? We want our freedom. So there was a big clash of cultures, and the Texanians, in the end, won out. And later on, joined as the 28th state of the United States. And behind all of this was the belief of manifest destiny, a dream that promised, basically the land was promised to them, that they were going to get it. And the greatest even though it was so great, there was a lot of tragedies that happened along the way. So history is never just one side to every story. As we talked about it, it was not Andrew Jackson that actually kicked the people out. That was Martin Van Buren. He came in after Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson put it into place. But that was only after, well, he put it into place before. But the removal was only after Cherokees betrayed the rest of the Cherokee Nation and signed a treaty to get $5 million and a plot of land further out, because they knew it was inevitable that they would be taken over. So, a lot being said here. We're going to go through the actual positions and the things that the presidents did from Andrew Jackson until James K. Polk in Wednesday's episode. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you come back soon. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.